All right, hello everyone. Here we are back for another Golf Clash tutorial here. Santa Ventura, hole number 4 here in Tour 11. So this is going to be from the third tee box here. And one of the things that, let me just go ahead while I have this, just draw my wind map here. And in terms of what I like to use on this is definitely sniper. And you really don't need a very huge sniper for this hole. We can go with 7 will be good enough. 8's better, but you know, 10, you're going to want, you know, ideally a 10, but you can get away with some pretty early clubs on this hole. You really don't need a lot of backspin. It's usually 4 less bars. So with that being said, you know, we can kind of get away with mid-level clubs for this one. In terms of cat, you know, it just needs to be unlocked. And you can technically win with this. No question. You know, once you have that 4 bars of backspin, you are good to go here. So let me talk about, first off, my primary shot. It's going to be right around here. You can see that I kind of favor the left-hand side here, and there's kind of a reason, the way that it kind of hops up here. Yeah, it's usually very predictable from the third tee deck when I aim here. And it'll usually kind of come in like this and kind of roll in from the side. Usually the normal way that the ball guide kind of looks is it kind of looks offset, very similar to what I am showing here. But what'll usually end up happening is it'll usually kind of jump up towards the hole, you know, even with, you know, this little bit of offset. It usually ends up kind of biting and kicking a little bit more towards the right-hand side just a little bit. So let's talk about the spin. It's definitely going to vary a little bit from shot to shot, but I'm usually somewhere around 2.5, 2.75. And again, it's kind of very specific to land zone anyway. So, you know, if I land 1 ring north versus 2 rings south of that, you know, it's going to completely change your spin. That needs to happen. So this is a very land specific shot. So definitely something to just be thinking about. For the tailwind, you know, I start to crank it up. I'm going to put, you know, we don't know what it's going to be in terms of, you know, how strong it's going to be. So I'll just kind of put in placeholders here. But as I mentioned, you know, up to around a 4 is pretty much going to max out what you'll need for this one. And with the headwind case here, it gets a little bit more challenging. And again, it's going to, you know, kind of be dictated by, you know, how severe it is. And, you know, I'll even sometimes start to go, once the headwind starts to get up there a little bit too much, especially towards this angle right here, this shot I almost never hit anyway. It would have to be a pretty small wind for me to even go for this, because here's what ends up happening is you start to, you know, need to aim way up here, way above this bunker, and you start to need to go into overpower. So because of that fact, I'll usually end up switching shots. And where do I switch shots? Kind of the next best shot, in my opinion, is this one. So you'll see this is kind of my go-to number 2 shot. I pretty much stay away from the right altogether. It's a little bit less predictable slope. It is still something that can be mastered, but it's something that I've never, you know, even started to mess around with, because it just has, you know, very inconsistent the way that it hops. However, you know, this shot over here, especially, you know, as I mentioned, I only pull this out in headwinds, so I'm only going to kind of mention it over here. for this case. You know, I'll throw inside here, but it's probably right around somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3.5-ish for my backspin, or 4, depending on, you know, if it's a slight headwind, and you'll really start to need to back off of that, you know, dramatically. So maybe 2.5 to 1. So maybe somewhere in this neighborhood. And it's also going to, you know, be dependent upon the severity of how strong it is as well. So you can't just, you know, go off of these numbers and just say, oh, I can do this. The hardest thing that you'll want, first off, you know, the way that you want to see this is you kind of want to have it bouncing here, and just kind of rolling through like this. However, when we're talking headwinds, you know, we're only going to be hitting this in a headwind. So let me put a example in here. So let's call this 12 miles per hour. Let's just kind of show you what I'm going to need to do with the ball guide in order to get it to come out and actually roll through like this. It's going to have to be kind of, you know, ridiculous looking. It's going to have to look like this, like it's going way through the hole, like way up out of here, you know, not even close for you to even, you know, most guys are going to underplay this in the headwind case, and they're going to roll out to either down here, or they might even wind up in the sand. So these are pretty much going to be pretty typical results for the guy who plays the headwind, because they won't consider enough wind effect. It's going to be, as I mentioned, you're going to have to severely start to back off of the backspin, especially when you land on an upslope like this. And you'll usually have to, like I mentioned, you know, offset this ball guide so ugly looking that, you know, it's hard to imagine that you need to offset it as much as you do. So, you know, with that being said, you can, you know, kind of get an idea of what needs to happen on this hole. Let's start to talk briefly about the cases as to how I usually play these. So for the headwind case, at least going to go max plus 30. Most of the time that I'll even need to overpower here. So what's nice though, since I won't be aiming over any rough or anything, you can see that I'll just be able to kind of set my overpower, you know, as much as I want, and it'll essentially at least, you know, avoid the rough. And that's one of the main reasons that I'll switch to this side, because I don't have to worry about starting to land long here. For the side wind, we're going to be looking at about max plus 20%. And same for the tailwind. So right around max plus 20. In this case, maybe 25 for the tailwind, because we're going to be going for this shot, and it does have a tendency to land a little bit long. So you might need to crank it up just a little bit. So good luck with this hole, guys. Hopefully you find some of this useful, and you know, especially for this headwind case, you can start to master. So good luck, and see you guys on the next guide.